Vampire Survivors, the game that Flash games wish they were, with the success that AAA games wish they had. It's hard to really put into words why this game that you can literally play with only one hand, no not that way you pervert, works so phenomenally well. Maybe it's the simplicity, maybe it's the novelty, maybe it's just refreshing in a world with overly complex narratives and battle passes and in-app purchases. One thing's for sure though, this game is pure dopamine that's shot directly into your veins for that sweet, sweet feeling of, maybe my life isn't so bad after all. This game absolutely exploded at the beginning of 2022 and became a viral hit. And even though its activity has settled down quite a bit since its initial release, it's still going strong today with enough concurrent players to reach number 58 on Steam's most played games at the time that I write this. Not bad for a little $4 game that you can play with only one hand, no not that way you pervert. But with great success comes great responsive copying. Lots and lots of copying. And hey, that's fine. That's perfectly okay. Video games are only as good as they are today because game developers enjoyed something that they played so much that they couldn't help but become inspired and just had to put their own spin on the mechanics that they just discovered that they really, really love. Or maybe they're just in it for the cash, which actually I believe is a lot rarer than you would think. It's generally pretty easy to tell when something is genuinely a labor of love or if it's just a shameless attempt at cashing in on a current trend. I'm not sure yet if I use the word clone for the title of this video, but you're just gonna have to forgive me for using such salacious terminology if I did. YouTube practically forces us into these provocative titles, so I apologize if the word clone personally offends you because one of your favorite games happens to be on this list. And that was absolutely not my intention. And I'm serious, video games are only made better in the long run by developers aping ideas from each other. I mean, look, without the original Doom, we probably wouldn't have Valorant. Okay, never mind. Maybe video games were a mistake. The first game that I found on this list that made me want to make this video in the first place is a game called Rogue Genesia. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Rogue Genesia is 6 parts Vampire Survivor, 3 parts Slay the Spire, and 2 parts Octopath Traveler, I guess? At least only visually. So yeah, it's got that like 3D, 2D aesthetic going, and while it's not quite as polished as something like Octopath Traveler, it is very novel. At least currently it still is novel. In fact, if I'm being honest, I think this game is the one that has the most potential and the most fun. At least currently, because all of these games are being updated just constantly. Just constantly, man. They don't stop. It's one of the reasons why it took me so long to make this video, is just because they keep updating. Stop it. No, don't stop it. Updating's good. What really draws me to this game more than just about any other that I have on this list is the Slay the Spire style of progression. In case you're somehow not aware by now, the way Slay the Spire works is you're dropped into a tower, and you chart your path across the tower through a bunch of different forks until you finally reach the boss at the end. Along these forks you can find treasure chests or enemy encounters or random events and a bunch of fun, interesting things. And as you continue to move forward, you increase your power through gaining cards. You'll find a lot of that here in Rogue Genesia, but instead of only gaining cards at the end of a level or during an event, you can also gain cards through leveling up, just like in Vampire Survivors. As far as the base gameplay goes, it's pretty similar to what Vampire Survivors has to offer. When you level up or select a card, you can select some kind of passive upgrade, or you can collect the weapon, or upgrade one of the weapons you already have. Feels very familiar, but unlike Vampire Survivors, Rogue Genesia does not limit you to 7 passives and 7 active weapons. You can have as many as you want, although you're probably going to want to build wisely because you can only level up so fast. So that makes the builds that you can end up with a little less predictable, at least in theory. But in practice, what ends up happening is you tend to want to select the same things over and over again because they're the things that have the most power that can completely break your build. And that's really one of the big problems that Rogue Genesia has. It's that it's too easy to just break the game and not have a challenge anymore. Both Vampire Survivors and Rogue Genesia have a sort of meta progression menu where you can spend some of the currency that you've earned during your gameplay in your matches on just becoming more powerful overall. But with Vampire Survivors, even if you max out those passives, you still have a chance to lose. You're still on your toes pretty much every step of the way, even if you get really good at the game. But with Rogue Genesia, these meta progression purchases that you can collect completely overpower you for these lower level difficulties. So it becomes all too easy to find yourself just standing still, only really interacting with the game when it's time to level up and choose an upgrade. And I don't know how I feel about that. Because your character's power can swing so heavily in the direction of being overpowered, there's also the chance that that your character's power can swing heavily in the direction of not being strong enough, and both of those feel terrible for completely different reasons. So while I do like the unique things that this game has to offer, I think that the balance is kind of holding it back. Or should I say lack of balance, because that's kind of what it feels like. But Rogue Genesia has so many cool things going for it. It's got the Slay the Spire inspired levels, it's got survival mode that's just like Vampire Survivors, where you have to survive for 30 minutes, and that can be pretty fun. The meta progression in and of itself, it's got some interesting ideas there, and it has challenges that you can take on to unlock more things and just have, a unique type of gameplay experience for the course of that challenge. A lot of really cool things to offer here, it's just the balance brings it down. Like I said, this game is being updated like crazy, so hopefully they land on a balance that feels a lot better overall and ends up feeling a lot less tedious and boring because you're too strong or even too weak. I don't know, time will tell. The second game that I ended up playing is a game called Brotato. Yes, it's as goofy as it sounds. You're basically a little potato running around a tiny little arena, shooting things, doing potato things. Honestly, this game had the weakest first impression of all the games that I played, but it ended up being one of the strongest contenders out of everything that I've played. Truthfully, this game has very little to do with Vampire Survivors. Pretty much the only thing that it has in common with Vampire Survivors is the fact that you run around with the WASD keys and you aim and shoot automatically. That's about it. Aside from that, Brotato operates on distinct waves, or levels if you want to call them that. First, you choose your character from a very wide and very creative set of character classes, and then you load into the first wave. And then the first wave lasts something like 20 seconds, and then you're taken to a shop screen. Then you rinse and repeat for another 20 waves. And that's it. And even though I haven't personally played it, the gameplay loop kind of reminds me of what I've seen of Super Battle Pets. Please correct me if I'm wrong, because I might be wrong. So just like all of these other Vampire Survivor likes, you can level up, but the main way that you're going to be building power is through the shop and collecting items through the shop. You can buy weapons, you can upgrade your weapons, you can have up to 6 weapons depending on which class you have, and then you're kind of encouraged to focus your build on some specific stats. Maybe you want maximum range, maybe you want to stack up your elemental damage, maybe you'd rather just have all the HP in the world. It's up to you. It's also, unfortunately, up to RNGesus if he's going to bless you with what you want. And in my experience, that happens far less often than I would like. I've had a pretty up and down experience with Brotato. Like I said, the first impression wasn't too strong, but I think it started to pull me back with how many interesting and unique items there were in the shop. But it started to push me away again whenever I started unlocking higher difficulties, and then the shop stopped giving me things that I really wanted for the build that I was trying to make, and it just felt like bad RNG was killing my runs. And yeah, I know that's not really any different than any other roguelike that you've ever played, but it just feels like weirdly bad in this game, and I can't explain exactly why. But then it started to pull me back again with all of these interesting and creative character classes that not only give you starting stats, but they sort of change the way that you play. For example, there's one that's all about running into enemies to deal damage to them instead of dealing damage with weapons, and that's the only way that you can hurt things, is by running into them. So you have to build around that idea instead of building around the weapons. So there's a lot of fun, creative ideas in Brotato that are kind of like that. And that's really one of the reasons I spent so much more time playing it than I expected going into it. Whoops. So I think it's pretty good. It can be pretty frustrating, but it's pretty good. If for no other reason than just the character classes are fun, man. They're just fun. The next game I found is a cute little game called Her Name Was Fire. This one kind of pulled me in because the art style I think is just fantastic. It's minimalistic and it leans heavily on a theme. Lots of red, lots of black, and it's got this kind of grief motif around its gameplay and its quote-unquote story, if you want to call it that for these kinds of games. But unfortunately, that's where the good things I have to say about this game end. As of making this video, the last major update that this game received was around Halloween, which honestly isn't that long ago, but for a game this small, it's kind of a long time, especially compared to a lot of the other games that I'm talking about on this list. But the main problems that this game has comes down to just the core gameplay itself. It doesn't really offer anything new or unique or uniquely deeply polished, so there's not really any reason to play this game over many of the other offerings or just Vampire Survivors on its own. There's very few things to unlock, there's not very many cards that you can collect as you level up, and once you beat a run once, you feel like you've already seen it all. The main sort of replayability that this offers is 3 different main weapon types, and then maybe unlocking some extra or different cards throughout the run. I will say one good thing about this game, other than the graphics though, is that you have your main spell, right? The main spell that I was talking about that you can select at the beginning of a run, and that main spell can be altered in a few different ways based on your choices throughout the match. So instead of collecting a ton of different weapons, you are altering your main weapon in important ways. But you can also collect other weapons like other Survivor-like games, but instead of them firing automatically and all the time, they're fired as you fire your main weapon. Whether or not this is a good or bad mechanic or a good or bad way to do extra power for a game like this, that's up to you. I'm not going to make a judgment call. I just think it's interesting and novel compared to a lot of the other things that I've played on this list. But unfortunately, as cool as this one looks, it's got to be a hard pass unless the developer comes back and makes it just like a million times better, or makes it offer something that the other games don't offer. It's too bad, because I really do like the way this one looks. Around the same time as I found Her Name Was Fire, I found this game called Soulstone Survivors. This one's a little unique in that it's 3D, and there's like active knockback, indestructible terrain. Not that any of that really matters for the gameplay, but you know, it's there. Unfortunately, I don't really like this game, like at all, which is weird because whenever I go to the store page, it's got a lot of very positive reviews. A lot of people are really seeming to like this one, and I can't really fully understand why it's resonating with people. My main problem with this game is just, I don't know, it's too much, man. It's too much. In my mind, what makes Vampire Survivors so good is the simplicity and the clarity. I think just about anybody can make a game and just dial it to 11. Make the effects go crazy. Make the colors go crazy. Add a million different abilities. Have so many enemies on the screen that you can't even see anything anymore. In fact, that's actually one of the main problems that Rogue Genesia has as well. But we're not talking about that game anymore. We're talking about Soulstone Survivors. And my main problem with Soulstone Survivors is the lack of clarity that it has. When you first pick up the game, it's not much of a problem. You can pretty much see what's going on because, you know, I guess the game is, you know, easing you in pretty nicely, and things are dying quick enough that explosions don't become much of a problem. But as you start clearing maps and you start adding these curse markers to your difficulty settings, things start surviving a lot longer. And as things survive longer, there's more happening on the field at any given moment. There's more explosions going in every which way. You can't really see the enemies past the explosions. You have exploding skeletons running into you, knocking you halfway across the map. All the while, you have 4 bosses on the board, and you're trying to take them out before the next 2 spawn, and you're sitting here on 6 HP, running in circles, hoping desperately that you find another healing crystal, or you level up just in time to give you a little bit of extra health, or you're just hoping that when you do level up, you get something that will increase your power in a significant way. And it's not just the gameplay that lacks clarity in Soulstone Survivors. If you look down here, on the bottom left-hand side of the screen, you'll have no idea what's going on. These are all of the upgrades that you've selected throughout a match. And if you can decipher this, good for you, man. Because I can't. Not really. What's the point of having this on the screen if I can't decipher it at a glance? I don't think there is one. But the lack of clarity for this little box of icons is just a symptom of the lack of clarity of your upgrade paths whenever you level up. Just like other games in this genre, whenever you level up, you can select weapons or passives. When it's time to select a weapon, you can select the weapon. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. But you're not upgrading that weapon in the same way you are in Vampire Survivors. You're upgrading your weapon through a somewhat interesting passive selection instead of selecting the same weapon again to level it up to level 2. These passives will either increase the damage done, increase the cast frequency, increase the multicast chance, or increase the area of effect. There might be others, but I can't remember off the top of my head. So that's already 4 distinct upgrades for every weapon type. So as they level up, they don't level up in a linear way. They level up just kind of based on what you choose. But assuming those 4 are the only ways that you can level them up, You also have to take into account that each of those 4 options can have 4 different rarities that make them level up better, okay? So that's like 16 different little icons that you can have at the bottom left-hand side of the screen. But that's not all. You can find certain cards that level up multiple weapons at the same time, which are unique in and of themselves. So you can see why this little box down here means absolutely nothing to anybody who's looking at it. So not only do you have this meaningless set of icons, not only do you have just a million different possible kinds of cards that you can collect to where it's really difficult to actually come up and like control what build you're making, but you also just have this absolute cacophony of noise and color on screen that just becomes a little too much. And then the game just kind of wants you to keep playing it over and over and over and over and over again, because you can only get certain upgrade materials on certain maps, but you can only increase the difficulty of each map one at a time by doing them over and over again. And there's like so many different classes, and you have to get them to level 10 or 30 or whatever to be able to unlock some other passive things in some other tree, while you're also unlocking weapons at the blacksmith, which you need those materials for. It's just too much. There's too much complexity, and it's unnecessary. It just feels so unnecessary. Don't get me wrong, I think there's some interesting ideas here. I just think it needs to be pared down. It's just too much. It's too bright. It's too colorful. It's too noisy. It's too much meta. There's too much everything. Just calm down, man. Just chill out. That's all you gotta do. Just relax. But I don't know. There's plenty of people who like this game. More power to them. It's not for me. Maybe it's for you, though. Do you like this game? Let me know in the comment section below. Did I miss something? Is it just... Am I bad? Am I mad because bad? Let me know. Next up, we have 20 Minutes Till Dawn. I initially wasn't going to cover this one, but I couldn't resist. I think it's, as far as I can tell, it's one of the original quote-unquote clones that came out after Vampire Survivors hit it big, and it's pretty cool. So this one's definitely a little bit different in that you have a singular weapon that you're upgrading throughout the game, and you're manually aiming it. You're not firing it automatically, you're aiming it yourself, because you're an adult, and you've learned how to do that. You don't need the game to aim for you. You're beyond these petty things. So yeah, that immediately, I guess, raises the skill ceiling a little bit. And in general, this game is quite a bit harder than a lot of the other Survivor likes. One, because you have to aim, and 2, I think it's just in general a little bit harder, especially when you have, you know, your normal starter character has 3 hits of health that they can take, and healing is very, very rare. Of course, there's some builds that you can have more healing, or you can, you know, find ways to mitigate that, or you can just, you know, not get hit. It's always an option. But in general, I think this game is quite a bit harder than a lot of the games on this list. In fact, if you wanted something a little more manual and a little more difficult, I dare say that this is the game for you. And on top of all that, it absolutely oozes style. Like, it's just so cool to see in motion. And the color palette that they chose feels so appropriately dark. The main gameplay of 20 Minutes Till Dawn is about what you would expect. It's just run and gun. You're shooting down hordes of enemies and leveling up. But the main replayability for this one comes from the choice of characters and the choice of guns. And you can mix and match them to your heart's content, baby. You like this character, but you like this gun? Go at it. It's all up to you. The character and gun you choose will kind of force you down a specific build path just because of, you know, synergy reasons. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. If there's anything that I dislike about this game, it's how rare the healing is and how low characters' health pools are, and just kind of how limited the upgrade paths are. There's really not a lot of different upgrades that you can get in this game. Although what that does mean is that each of the upgrades are pretty well balanced, pretty interesting, well thought out. But at the same time, I kind of wanted a little more variety. Like, I know I complained about Soulstone Survivors being a little too on the complex side for my tastes, but this one I think kind of is too far on the simplicity side. There's really not enough going on to keep me interested long term with 20 Minutes Till Dawn. It's a really cool game. I just wish it had a little more going on. And finally, we're gonna save my favorite for last. This is Boneraiser Minions. I love necromancers, man. I think the class concept is so cool. I've loved summoning classes since I was little. I don't know why. I've always thought they were interesting and fun, and Diablo 2, Necromancer was my favorite class. Diablo 3 was less fun, because Diablo 3 was less fun, but, you know, I digress. Boneraiser Minions lets you be a necromancer. You're not collecting weapons and killing things yourself. No. You are summoning fighting a bunch of undead minions, undead archers, undead swordsmen, bats, witches and skeleton bombers, and all sorts of crazy undead things, and you're letting them do the job for you. Just like a good old necromancer would. You're just running around, collecting bones, leveling up, and when you level up, you can summon another dude. Or you can upgrade one of the dudes you summoned. Or you can combine two of the dudes that you summoned into a bigger, better dude. Or you can take the soul of a hero that you've slain, put it into one of your dudes, and turn them into a possessed demon. This game's kind of weird. It's cool though. I love it. This game burns so hot, but it also burns so fast. I bought this game just to put it in this video, and within the first 48 hours of owning this game, I had pretty much 100% everything that it had to offer. Since then, they've updated it a lot, and I don't have things 100% anymore, but that's how addicted I got to this game whenever it came out, or whenever I bought it. It's just so fun. Like I said, I love necromancers, so I might be a little biased. There's a lot of fun things in this game. You can like customize your mausoleum. You can collect cards to do a collectible card game, like a card battler, like you know what they did in Final Fantasy games, where you have those optional card games that you can do. I don't know why they chose to do this in a Vampire Survivor like, but you know, more power to them. I don't care about playing it, so I ain't gonna. I just want you to know that it's there. There's like a bunch of different classes that have a bunch of different play styles and a bunch of different minion types that they are obsessed with. There's even one that instead of having minions, you get the powers of the minions. They're updating this game like crazy too, adding so many classes that I can't keep up. I can't keep up anymore. But this game is so cool. And if you enjoyed Vampire Survivors and you want something a little more necromancery, this is going to be the game for you. This is it. This is the one. You can thank me later. But that's about it. That's almost all the games that I played. And there's like probably a dozen or more that I could have covered in this video. There's just too many of them, man. Way too many of them. It's always crazy to see how many games just appear out of nowhere whenever something gets popular. Something new comes out of the woodwork, it goes viral, and then there's a million games that are doing something similar. Whether you want to call it a clone, or you just want to, you know, call it what it is and say it's an inspiration that elevates gaming as a whole, you know, that's up to you. I personally don't think there's anything wrong with these games existing. If you have a problem with me using the word clone, like I said, blame YouTube for making me want to use these salacious words. But other than that, unless a game is shameless in how much it's just straight up copying or ripping off of another game, I say the more the merrier. Just because Vampire Survivors did it best doesn't mean it's the only one that can do it, right? So yeah, that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Have you played any of these Vampire Survivor likes? Any of the ones that I missed? What's your favorite? Let me know down in the comments below. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've spent way too much time playing all of these games. I need a break. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.